The corridors of the palace glimmered under the soft hum of ambient lights, their brightness reflecting off the polished surfaces in a kaleidoscope of color that seemed almost alive. The human man had been following a routine security check, which, by every protocol he had ever memorized, should have been as dull as observing a star slowly burn out over millennia. Instead, it turned into chaos faster than he could blink. A sharp metallic clang echoed through the hall, followed by the unmistakable whir of a plasma blade cutting through the air, and the cold realization hit him that someone very determined, was trying to end the life of the ruler before his eyes. She was already turning toward the noise, her long ears flicking slightly as if hearing the world in a spectrum humans couldn't comprehend. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, an electric hue that seemed almost to hum with intelligence, flared with alertness and something he couldn't name, perhaps surprise, perhaps amusement at the audacity of the attacker. The assassin lunged, and time slowed, though not elegantly like in Hollywood's. Everything was messy and terrifying. Without thinking, the man threw himself in front of her, and the plasma blade nicked his shoulder. Pain erupted with such precision that he briefly considered whether the universe had a cruel sense of humor or just terrible timing. He fell to the ground, grimacing, while the alien ruler stumbled back but remained upright, her robes flowing as if aware of gravity in a way humans would never understand. Around them, the chamber's defense drones whirred and beeped, some attempting to intercept the assassin, others colliding comically with one another as they miscalculated trajectories in their urgency. One small drone spun in midair like a confused insect, bumping the man's helmet with a polite apology tone, an unintentionally funny moment in the middle of chaos. The ruler's calm voice cut through the pandemonium, sharp and commanding, yet with a hint of dry wit. "You could have at least waited for the ceremonial tea before throwing yourself in front of me," she said, her long ears twitching in what he interpreted as alien annoyance. The man, still clenching his wound, managed a weak, ironic smile. "Tea would have been nice, but I figured the assassination attempt might make it awkward." She blinked at him, and for a moment he thought he saw genuine curiosity in her gaze, a spark that wasn't just about danger, but about him, the absurd human who had thrown his life onto the line without protocol, without training for heroism, just instinct and perhaps a reckless streak. As the palace medical bots arrived, hovering with precision and emitting a chorus of polite electronic sounds, the man tried to brace himself for treatment. One bot, misreading his flailing gestures, accidentally shot a stream of nano-healing gel onto the floor instead of his wound. He muttered under his breath, "Great, now the floor's getting patched before me." The ruler tilted her head, watching with a mix of amusement and something closer to fascination, long ears flicking as if she were processing a joke only she understood. Finally, the bots corrected themselves, and a soothing warmth spread across his body, easing the excruciating pain, while the assassin, foiled and surprisingly elegant in their failure, was neutralized without further incident. When he finally opened his eyes, the chamber was quiet, the emergency protocols winding down. The ruler stood over him, hands clasped behind her back, examining him like one might observe a particularly stubborn specimen of alien flora. "You realize what this means?" she asked, voice calm but with a hint of teasing lilt. "I do hope it's not my turn to fetch you tea every morning." The man groaned. "I have a feeling this isn't about tea." She arched an eyebrow, and though she didn't smile outright, her ears twitched ever so slightly, betraying a trace of amusement. Somewhere in the palace archives, a holographic document projected itself. Ancient laws dictating that anyone who shed blood to protect the ruler was now bound to them in ways both practical and ceremonial. The man's eyes widened as the weight of it settled on his shoulders, though his first instinct was humor. "So, let me guess. I just saved your life and now I'm officially stuck with you." She nodded, the corner of her mouth twitching with what humans might call the ghost of a smile. "Precisely. Welcome to your new job, human. Don't worry, it's more complicated than it sounds, and infinitely more entertaining." As he was lifted onto a hovering stretcher, drifting toward the medical wing, he caught a glimpse of the city outside the palace walls, skyscrapers shaped like twisting spires, ships moving through the sky like silver fish in a luminous ocean. He thought about the absurdity of his situation. Wounded, bound by an ancient law, and under the care of a woman whose long ears and piercing gaze made her seem both impossibly regal and oddly approachable. The tension of his predicament was softened by the flashes of humor, the small oddities of alien life, and the strange warmth that began to grow in that impossible proximity. Even as pain throbbed and protocols loomed, he couldn't stop a small, incredulous laugh from escaping his lips. Somehow, somewhere in this chaotic, radiant world, his life had taken a turn that no training, no experience, and certainly no human logic could have prepared him for. He woke to the soft hum of medical drones and the faint, warm glow of bioluminescent panels lining the walls of the recovery wing. His arm throbbed unpleasantly, but his mind wandered more to the presence hovering near him, a figure of impossibly poised elegance. The alien ruler leaned over the edge of his levitating bed, her long ears tilted slightly, scanning the monitors with a precision that made him feel simultaneously observed and studied. He tried to sit up, wincing, only to have a pair of gentle hands press him back down. "Relax, you're not allowed to climb walls yet," she said, a trace of dry amusement in her voice. "Besides, you might knock yourself into another star." He couldn't help but laugh, the sound raw but filled with a relief that felt almost alien in its own right. "At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up on one," he muttered. Her eyes, bright and alert, followed his every micro-expression. But instead of the chill of scrutiny he expected from a ruler, there was a glimmer of curiosity, even playful judgment. "You humans are ridiculously resilient," she said. "Most would have passed out after a third of what you've endured." He lifted one eyebrow. "Ridiculously resilient or ridiculously stupid?" She tilted her head, ears twitching in a way he had come to associate with both bemusement and calculation. "Perhaps a bit of both, but your mistakes are entertaining." The humor, subtle and warm, threaded itself into the air between them, creating a fragile bridge in a world that might otherwise have been all rules and danger. As the days passed, his recovery became less about the pain in his shoulder and more about surviving her unusual methods of care. She insisted on personally supervising every nano-injection, every nutrient infusion, and every attempt to get him to walk again. Her techniques were a combination of science, ritual, and what could only be described as eccentric improvisation. Floating gel packs that shimmered with light as they eased his wounds, gravity-modifying pods that allowed him to exercise without putting strain on his muscles, and bioluminescent algae compresses that left his skin glowing faintly in shades of blue and green. One evening, he caught himself staring at his glowing forearm and muttered, "I look like a radioactive jellyfish." She twitched an ear and deadpanned, "You wear it better than most." Their conversations drifted easily between practical matters and absurdities. He learned about the palace's gravity fields, which occasionally reversed for reasons he never fully understood, often resulting in a floating soup bowl or a startled servant drifting past him. She described her world with a mix of elegance and casual humor, pointing out that their elevators were built like miniature anti-gravity arenas, because the engineers had thought vertical transportation should be fun, dramatic, and mildly dangerous. He rolled his eyes, joking that at least they weren't boring, and she flicked her long ears in amusement, clearly entertained by his willingness to mock her culture without disrespect. The palace itself became a playground of curiosities. Floating gardens with luminescent vines whispered as he passed, and robotic caretakers occasionally collided, producing comical chains of clumsy apologies. In the midst of all this, their bond strengthened, not in words of devotion, but in laughter over mishaps, in small victories like taking a step unaided or balancing in low gravity without toppling into a hovering table. He discovered that her humor, when it appeared, was sharp and clever, often teasing him about human tendencies he hadn't realized were visible to alien scrutiny. And she discovered that humans could persist, joke, and occasionally insult with a charm that her people, brilliant as they were, found surprisingly endearing. Yet the ancient law that bound them lingered in the background, subtle but unyielding. Every gesture of care, every shared smile, and every joking argument carried weight. She could not treat him merely as a guest. He could not escape the obligations their world demanded. And still, amid hovering medbots, gravity-defying vegetables, and glowing compresses, they found moments that were entirely theirs. He made her laugh when he tripped spectacularly over a low-energy field she had neglected to mention, and she flicked her ears in mock indignation, responding with a display of agility that made him realize she could catch him mid-fall if she wanted. He grinned despite himself, the tension of duty and law melting into amusement and growing trust. By the end of his second week, the human man was walking, leaning on her arm for balance. Each step was a mixture of triumph, comedy, and alien observation. They wandered through the palace corridors, passing floating orbs that projected historical events and holographic teachers that occasionally lectured him in unintelligible syllables, which he ignored while joking that he was learning the ancient art of looking confused. She laughed once, an unexpected, light, human-like sound, and he realized, in that moment of levity, that their connection had begun to transcend protocol. The bond imposed by law was no longer a chain. It was a scaffold for shared curiosity, quiet jokes, and the strange exhilaration of surviving together in a world both dazzling and absurd. The human had grown accustomed to the odd rhythm of palace life, though accustomed was a relative term when gravity fields occasionally reversed mid-step or a medbot insisted on polishing his armor mid-conversation. By now, the ruler's court had stopped gawking at him with whispers and speculative glances, though the advisors were still muttering under their breath about the unprecedented nature of his bond with the alien ruler. He had learned quickly that in her world, protocol and law were as rigid as the metal spires that jutted from the cityscape outside, yet humor could bend them just enough to breathe. They were walking through the suspended gardens that hung like delicate lanterns over the city, his arm supported lightly by hers. The plants drifted gently, glowing in soft bioluminescence, and occasionally a small fruit orbited them in a slow, dizzying spin, prompting him to joke. "Do these come with orbit instructions, or should I just catch them when they hit my head?" She flicked an ear and smirked faintly, clearly entertained. "You're lucky the ancient laws don't dictate punishment for bad puns," she said. He grinned, realizing that humor had become one of the bridges between their worlds, a secret language of levity in a society that demanded formality and discipline. Political tensions had risen during his recovery, whispers of human influence infiltrating the court, and the potential disruption of alliances. He had once imagined that these worries would make him tense, hypervigilant, but he discovered an unexpected confidence, born from surviving both physical danger and cultural collision. With her beside him, offering sharp insight and dry humor, he found himself negotiating palace politics, sometimes by clever observation, sometimes by deliberate absurdity. On one occasion, he mimicked the exaggerated bowing rituals of visiting ambassadors, causing her to snort, a sound more human than royal, and the room relaxed in unexpected amusement. It was a small, ridiculous victory, but it marked the first time he realized his presence might reshape the environment, not just survive within it. Their bond had deepened in ways neither law nor custom could dictate. She now sought his opinion on matters beyond the ceremonial, teasing him about his human tendencies even as she relied on his unorthodox ideas. They practiced combat drills together, mostly for amusement, and he learned that her long ears were not just ornamental, but instruments of extraordinary perception, capable of detecting the slightest shifts in the air and sound. Humor threaded through these exercises, too. A failed leap across a low-gravity platform resulted in him crashing into a holographic statue, eliciting a rare, full laugh from her that resonated across the suspended corridors. He realized that connection, trust, and courage could emerge from shared mistakes and laughter as much as from solemn heroics. Then came the final test. A rival faction had attempted to exploit his presence, hoping to manipulate him to sway the ruler's decisions. They thought him inexperienced, malleable, and burdened by human sentiment. Instead, he met them with a combination of blunt logic, human stubbornness, and carefully timed absurdity that left the would-be manipulators both baffled and frustrated. She watched, ears twitching, a faint smile playing at her lips, recognizing not just survival instincts but a strategic mind tempered by empathy and humor. In that moment, he realized how far he had grown. From a security specialist reacting to immediate danger, to someone capable of navigating intrigue, cultural complexity, and the delicate dance of politics in a society vastly unlike his own. At the day's end, he stood beside her on the highest balcony of the palace, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. The city below shimmered like liquid light, ships tracing glowing arcs as they returned to orbiting stations. He reflected on the journey. The pain, the ridiculous mishaps, the glowing algae, the gravity-defying vegetables, and the countless moments that had taught him patience, resilience, and the subtle power of humor in the face of impossibility. She glanced at him, ears tilting in a way that conveyed both pride and amusement, and he understood that their connection had evolved from duty into trust, curiosity, and something far more personal. He grinned, a genuine, unguarded expression, and said, "I suppose we make a decent team if you can overlook my habit of bumping into everything." She tilted her head, long ears brushing the wind, and responded, "You're not as clumsy as you think, human. And I've grown fond of your peculiarities." The word was deliberate, understated, yet carried warmth. The man realized that he had changed.